There's a lot to talk about with the new PIGMENTS 6 from Arturia, but I thought we'd start off with a few of my favourite new presets. This video is sponsored by DistroKid. Follow the VIP link in the description down below to get 7% off an already amazing price to distribute your music to the world. Now, whilst I absolutely love PIGMENTS, I really am a presets kind of a guy, but I'm going to try to overcome that now in order to demonstrate their new modal engine. And perhaps one of the takeaways of this might be, if I can achieve results, then you certainly can, because I'm really a sound design beginner. Let's dive in and take a look. So I've already done a dry run here and came up with a sound I was pretty happy with. So I'll walk you through the steps I went through right now. I started off with the default preset. I then went over and changed the engine type to the new modal engine, and then I switched off any effects. I don't want to hear those for the moment. So the basic sound I ended up with was this. That's about a million miles away from what I actually wanted, which is a much more sort of percussive and airy kind of sound. So I'm going to show you what I did to change it to that. First of all, I don't like the release of this sound. As soon as I lift my finger off the key, the sound stops almost immediately. So I'm going to extend the release time down here just by dragging the control for it out at the bottom here. So now I've got this sound. Okay, that's a small improvement, but it's not really what I want, which is a much more sort of percussive sound. Now, a big part of the sound we're getting here is coming from the resonator model. We've got two models to choose from. We can choose string or we can choose beam. Now, with string, which is what we had it set to at the moment, this is mimicking the behavior of a stretched string. With the beam setting, this is much more like a kind of a metal or a wooden block. It's mimicking the behavior of that, and that's the kind of sound that I want. So I'm going to leave that on beam, and I'm going to test this sound out now with a little MIDI sequence that I prepared earlier. It's sounding like this. Okay, not too bad. Now, can you see as the sound is being played here? You can see all these little lines up here. These represent the partials or the harmonics which are being added to the fundamental. And this has a really big effect on the character of the sound. Now, we can change the number of partials up here with this control. So I'm going to do that now, and you'll definitely hear the difference as I reduce them. So that's one way to really change the character of the sound. And we can also change the kind of balance of those partials using the brilliance control. As I move this brilliance control down, you'll see the higher partials get quieter, and that again changes the character of the sound. So what I'm going to do is just play my MIDI sequence for a moment, and I'm going to adjust the partials here, the brilliance, and also the decay of these as well. Let's have a listen. Now, another significant way in which this sound is being affected is with two exciters that we've got here. One on the left is called the collision exciter, and the one on the right is called the friction exciter. I'm going to turn the volume of the friction exciter down all the way now, so we're only hearing the collision exciter, which sounds like this. Now we've got a few options with this exciter. We can leave it on collision, or we can change it to transient, and we can use different samples here. I'll cycle through some now. Have a listen. Now another option we've got here is for audio input. Now I didn't actually use this in my final sound, but I will demonstrate this to you now. Essentially, we can either use live audio input to kind of trigger our sound, or we can use some pre-recorded audio from another track in our DAW. Now the sound that I'm going to be using is this kick drum, which currently sounds like this. Now remember that rhythm. We're not actually going to hear that kick drum. I'm instead going to send it through as an audio source here for my audio input. Now when I play my sequence again, listen to how that's affecting it. So I'm sure you can imagine amazing possibilities for that. But as I say, I didn't use it. I, in fact, wanted to stick with the original collision exciter mode here. And I'm just going to adjust it slightly now in terms of the attack. I want it to be a little softer. Okay, with my collision exciter set up, I'm going to turn its volume all the way down so we can't hear it, and then I'm going to turn up the friction exciter over here so we can hear what that's doing. Have a listen. Pretty dreamy, huh? There's lots of possibilities here. I'll adjust the density. Have a listen to how that affects it. Cool, but a bit too random for me. Let's try out some other options here. The first one is the noise one. We'll have a listen to this, and again I'll go through these different samples here so you can hear their effect. We've also got this granular option here. I really like this. Have a listen. And of course, as you've probably seen, we've also got that audio input option here. I'm not going to use that. I'm going to stick with granular, but instead of setting the rate in terms of hertz, I'm going to actually sync it to my DAW like so. And I'm going to set this to 3/16. This gives us quite an interesting kind of counter rhythm to our sound. So have a listen to this. Cool, and now let's bring in the collision exciter again. And I'm just going to increase the sound of the fundamental in this by pushing up this bass control. Rather like that. Now for a lovely finishing touch, I'm going to turn on effects over here. I'll switch that on. I don't want this delay effect, but I do want a kind of a reverb. And I'm going to change this from a regular reverb to a shimmer. Now let the magic begin. What's not to like about that? Now, I just want to quickly mention that if you're an existing Pigments user, then Pigments 6 is a free upgrade for you. How awesome is that? Talking about awesome things, if you want to release your music to places like Spotify, Amazon, Google Play, etc., don't forget to follow the VIP link in the description down below to our sponsor DistroKid, where you can get 7% off of your first year of membership. So there's been some improvements to the filters in this version, and with this classic low pass 12 filter we can see here, one of the main things is the drive control. This is really handy for adding a little bit of grittiness to it. We've got an option here to choose between an analog or a digital version. I've got the analog chosen. Now, one of the things about turning the drive control up is going to be that you're going to need to turn the main volume down as you do it, because it's obviously going to make things louder. So what I've done to make that easy on myself is created a macro for that. You can see macro 1 down here. As I push it up, then the drive goes up, but the volume goes down accordingly. So let's have a listen to see how that affects the sound. Gotta say, got a lot of love for that. Let's try out a different filter. We've now got a lo-fi filter here. So again, as the name suggests, it's a lo-fi filter. I think it's fun if we kind of animate this a little bit, have some movement, perhaps associate it to an LFO or something. You can do that yourself, but I'm just going to do it manually for a moment. Let's have a listen. Again, I think I could put that to good use. And finally, I'm going to try out the new cluster filter type. I'll set this to peak 18. This is probably better on pads and things. I will change this resonator to string here at the moment, so we get a slightly sort of longer sound, but I would probably be tempted to use it, or I would say you get a better idea of it on a pad, but we'll use it on this sound for now. Have a listen to it. One of the new features for this version is the vocoder effect. Now we can use the vocoder to modulate our sound from several different sources. So you can see here we can select several different parts of the actual synth to trigger the vocoder. But I think most of you will associate a vocoder with a kind of a vocal source, and you can do that by selecting audio in. Now I've previously recorded a vocal track to trigger this vocoder, and this is what I got as a result.
I can subscribe if you like what I do for you, and I hope that you really do like the sound I'm making for you, making for you.
So there's been some changes and updates to the modulators in this version. I'm just going to give you a couple of interesting examples. I'm in the random tab here at the bottom. I'm going to go ahead and select the new voice modulator. You can see there's 8 steps to this, and you can set different values. And basically we can use this to modulate different parts of our sound on a per note basis. Okay, let's see it in action. So I'm just going to reset it so they're all centered. I'm going to assign this to, let's assign it to our number of partials up here, and then I'll just make it fairly extreme so that we'll hear the extremes of it. And now as I play each note and I adjust each of these, let's do some sort of obvious adjustments like so. You'll see it cycle through and change the number of partials. So in this way, we're actually changing the kind of character of our sound on a per note basis. I think that's kind of really interesting. Let's listen to it with our sequence. And you know, we can either cycle through, or we could, for example, just randomly go to each part of this modulator. So some nice kind of human variation there, which I quite like. I'll reset that and show you another modulator, this time on the Combinate tab here, and then I'll go over and select the envelope follower. So you could use this in various different ways. I am going to select that audio that I recorded earlier as the source here. So I'll select audio input. This is the sort of vocal that I used earlier. And again, I'm going to assign this to something sort of fairly obvious. Let's do it to the brilliance here this time. Yeah, and I'll again do a fairly aggressive setting there. And I'll start to play this and you'll start to hear subtly how it affects it. As that audio signal got stronger, it increased the brilliance, which, as I mentioned earlier, was kind of adjusting the balance between the lower and higher harmonics. Quite a subtle effect there, but very, very useful. Arturia have described this as the best Pigments update since version 2. Do you agree with that? Let me know in the comments down below. I'd love to hear your thoughts. And by the way, thank you so much for joining me today. I'm Mike. I hope you're well, and I'll see you in the next video.